If you're in the market for a new hybrid in 2023, then Titleist have three interesting options for you to consider. There's the TSR1, which is designed for sort of moderate and slower swing speed players, and then the two that we've got in our hands here today. So I've got the TSR3 and Joel has the TSR2. Now, Joel, do you want to just start by hitting one for us? The main difference between them is the size of the head. So the TSR3 is a lot more compact than the two. Good shot. And Joel, just in terms of the looks, how does the two compare to what we had from Titleist in the previous generation?
Yeah, so compared to the TSI2, the TSR2 is actually quite a lot larger down behind the ball. It has a much bigger profile, and that's driving the weight a bit deeper in the head. And from the testing that I've done so far, we've had a launch monitor out, and looking at the ball flight, what that's going to do is give you a slightly higher ball flight. So if you're someone who struggles to flight the ball with your hybrid, you're really going to enjoy what you get from the TSR2. And obviously down at address, because it is a bit larger, just inspires a bit more confidence. It's much more fairway-wood-like in the way it looks versus the TSR3, which you've got there, which is a little bit more iron-like and more compact for the slightly better player. Yeah,
I think if you want that that feeling that you've got a generous footprint, it's going to help you get the ball up in the air. You don't have to swing it too hard to get the flight that you're looking for. Also, think about the times that you're using it. You're using it to hit greens, so you want that descent angle to stop the ball on the greens.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're someone who's got quite a shallow angle of attack into the ball, you're probably going to gravitate more towards a club like this with a wider sole. And what I also like about the TSR2 versus the TSI2 is that the lie angle's a little bit flatter, so it tends to have less left bias on it, which is a common complaint with hybrids, especially with the TSR3, which I know is a little bit more upright. Testing we've done, it goes a bit more draw bias to it, whereas this is a lot more neutral. So if you miss left, you're going to enjoy the ball flight with the TSR2.
Yeah. Joel, do you want to hit just another one for us? Because I think there's another key difference, and that's in terms of the sound and the feel. Hopefully you should be able to pick it up on the microphones when Joel hits it.
Definitely.
Now to me, the sound, it's quite interesting because it just sounds a bit more fairway-wood-like or driver-like. It's got that slightly higher pitch to it, slightly louder.
Yeah, it's a bit more metallic. It's got like a metallic kind of fizz to it. Like you say, a bit more driver-like, and compared to the TSR3, which we'll hit in a minute, much more of a quieter, denser sound. It's actually amazing how different the two hybrids sound and feel. There's a lot of contrast there.
If you want that more powerful, what I would describe as more powerful contact feel sensation, then the TSR3 is probably the way to go, but that still sounds solid to me.
It's really solid, and I think that's the other point of difference, that this feels a lot more stable, I think, versus the TSR3. So if you want a lot more forgiveness from your hybrid shots, if your strikes tend to deviate quite a lot across the face, you're going to enjoy the extra kind of MOI and forgiveness you're getting with this particular club.
Yeah, and obviously it's Titleist, and there's plenty of different fitting options, and I think we would both recommend that if you're going to invest in one of these, they are premium price point. You want them to fit in at exactly the right spot at the top end of the bag. So going through that process with somebody who knows what they're doing to fit you in terms of the numbers makes sense regardless of which one you go for. Yeah,
and it's worth pointing out that, you know, testing this TSR2 up against the TSI2 today, the ball flight was relatively similar. Like I said, slightly less draw bias to it, but I was getting a little bit more speed out of this hybrid versus the previous generation. So kind of about 1 mile an hour ball speed, which doesn't sound much, but it was equating to a few extra yards. So I think you're getting a little bit more performance as well as a bit more stability out of this club versus the TSI2. And the other change they've made with this sole in particular are these relief pockets, which Titleist say gives you better turf interaction because it's essentially taking away parts of the sole that's contacted into the ground. I didn't necessarily notice any difference in the way the club interacted with the ground, but I think you might notice it a bit more from the rough. When the club tends to get a bit snagged, you might find that it feels a little bit quicker through the rough, so that's just something to bear in mind.
Yeah, and because of that lie angle that you were talking about earlier, maybe if you feel like you've had tendencies with hybrids, particularly in the rough, getting snagged, hitting them left, maybe this one might help you on that front.
I think it's going to be a bit more playable from different lies. You want a hybrid to perform out of different lies, off the tee, off the deck, out of the rough. I think it might get you out of trouble a little bit more, but the differences between the TSI2 in that regard are probably a bit more subtle.
Yeah, okay, right, let's have a look at the TSR3. Should we have a hit of the TSR3?
Yeah, let's swap positions, Neil, and you can talk us through. Obviously, you've hit both of these hybrids, but you've played the TSI3 hybrid in the past, so you're very familiar with this franchise. How does the TSR3 maybe compare to that, and also compare to the TSR2?
Yeah, I think, as I say, it's the shape of the head. And if you're somebody that prefers a hybrid that's more iron-like to look down on, much more compact, then the TSR3 is definitely one to test this year. We had a look at a whole host of different hybrids across the market yesterday. This is definitely one of the most compact that you'll find. I quite like that feeling of hitting a little bit more down into the ball with a hybrid, a bit more turf interaction, so I quite like the TSR3 from that standpoint. And the other big difference is the feel.
Yeah, it's a much shorter sound, isn't it? Like much more iron-like.
Much more iron-like, and the ball flight is much more aggressive, quite a lot lower than it is with TSR2. I think that means you've got room to play with in terms of the loft. And again, that point about fitting is important here, because if I was hitting too many shots like that one came out pretty low, I'd probably want to crank up the loft. But that's fine, because I'm not looking to hit this as far as I possibly can. So you've got room to work with, is what I would say with this.
Yeah, definitely produces a flatter flight versus the TSR2. Even though that one popped up a little bit, but I don't think that was as high as where my TSR2 was going. The window is a bit lower. But obviously with the TSR3, you've got that movable weight in the SAR with those 5 positions. I mean, that's going to help change the trajectory, whether you're taking one side of the golf course out. How beneficial is that going to be for better players?
Yes, I think it is, and for the reason that the shot that I've just hit there, so when I was hitting that shot earlier and I had the weight tracking neutral, it was turning over quite a bit. I mean, it was still fine, it was playable, but I would probably be tempted to move that weight into the toe to give me maybe that feeling of more of a neutral ball flight.
Yeah, because I do think, I tested the TSR3 as well, it does seem to sit a little bit more upright, so it had a tendency to go a bit left. But actually, when you move the weight in the toe, it was surprising how much of an impact that had on the flight, wasn't it?
Yes.
You know, it wasn't curving, it was relatively subtle, but it wasn't curving as much as it was in that neutral position. Yeah,
I've always been a bit sceptical in the past, actually, about movable weights in more compact woods, about how much of a difference that makes. But certainly from the testing that I've done with this today, I really can feel and see the difference between them. Now, one of the things, Joel, that I would mention about both of these models, but also about some of the other hybrid models that I've seen and tested this year, is about consistency, is about the work the brands are doing with these models. Seems to me to be around giving you that consistent ball flight spin that you want and that you need. It feels like they're talking about it a lot in terms of drivers, you know, giving you that forgiveness, that consistency, but you really notice it as well in some of the other woods. And if you're coming into the greens with one of these, you want that reliable ball flight, and I think that's what you're getting with this generation. Yeah, they definitely packed a lot of playability into these heads. Even with the TSR3, despite it being compact, it's still quite forgiving off centre. Yes, yeah, that's probably what surprised me. Yeah. So if you're maybe veering away from a more compact hybrid, even though that's what you'd prefer, I would still test it, because I think there's a good amount of playability, as you say. I think while the TSR3, the shaping appeals to the better players, there's no reason why, you know, mid-handicappers couldn't benefit from the technology, and, you know, maybe they pop the ball up a little bit too high and they need something that's going to bring the flight down. Yes. You know, you're going to get that with the TSR3. You're going to get that with the TSR3, and I also think that you do get really good ability to play this from different lies around the golf course. So if you're wanting to hit hybrid shots, if you play a golf course with rough around and you're hitting a longer shots from the rough, then that more compact hybrid, I think, gets through that quite well. Yeah. Very good. I think that's a pretty good shot to finish on, Neil. So there you go, that's the new TSR2 and TSR3 hybrids. 2 excellent options if you're on the market for something in that area of the bag. I think with these 2 models, with the adjustability on offer in both the heads, it's going to suit a broad range of handicaps and playing styles. And hopefully you found this video useful in narrowing down your search in terms of picking the model that's right for you.